You have spent your entire life seeing some of the worst that humanity has to offer, and after 25 years of that, you retire. So what do you do next? How do you follow that up? Well, if you're a retired police sergeant for Milwaukee like Patrick O'Donnell, you become a successful author and teach other writers how to write cops well. That's who we're talking to today on Deviant Off Script. Just a reminder, follow us on social at deviant.podcast on Instagram and TikTok, and check out our Patreon. Lots of good stuff, lots of extras for the stories we're telling at deviantpodcast.com. Let's get into our chat with Patrick. Patrick O'Donnell, author, podcaster, author of the Brew City Blues series of books, and his new book, The Good Collar, joins us here today on Deviant Off Script. Patrick, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You write a lot about crime. You consult with people who want to write about crime, whether it's in film or books or whatever. There's a reason that you are qualified to do that. You were a police officer for 25 years with the Milwaukee Police Department. How did you get into that?
You know, it started, we were talking before we started rolling that, I'm from Chicago.
Yes.
And I was fascinated as a kid, with the police cars going up and down our streets with the blue lights. And it was exciting to watch. And we moved to Niles, actually, later on. And the police were doing a raid. They were serving a warrant on our neighbor's house. Now, all these houses are very close together. It's a densely populated urban area.
Yeah.
And I'm like, 10, 11 years old. And I'm looking out the kitchen window. And there's two officers wearing tack gear with the helmets and everything. One has an M16. The other guy's got a shotgun in our backyard covering down on our neighbor's house. And they come in with a ram. They're pulling people out. And I'm just like, I'm like, Ma, take a look at this.
That's a scene. That's a scene. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So that stuck in my head. And of course, watching Starsky and Hutch and Barney Miller and SWAT and Chips and all the cool TV shows. And, you're a kid, you're impressionable.
Yep.
And when I got to college, I went to University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. I started as a music major. Actually, I was going to be a band director, but that did not work out. And I switched majors to sociology with a criminal justice minor, and I had an internship with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department. And I tell you what, I did that for a summer, and I was hooked. I'm like, this is the coolest job ever. Yeah. I got to do this.
So you got your calling early. I mean, you felt it early. There wasn't a lot of doubt.
No, and I'm Irish. We become firefighters, cops, or politicians, and
from Chicago. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And I don't like heights, so much for the firefighting, and I don't like politics. So by default, I guess I'm a cop.
Yeah. Over your 25-year career there, you were a sergeant, but trace the trajectory of how your career went. Obviously, you started in patrol like everyone else, right?
You betcha. And I absolutely love patrol. That's where it's at. That's where all the action is. That's where the quote unquote fun is. I didn't know Milwaukee at all. I was living in Madison, actually, when I applied for the job. And I was in Milwaukee maybe a handful of times. I really didn't know the city at all. And we're getting ready to get out of the academy. And they're like, well, you're going to District 5. And I'm like, okay. There's 7 districts, so all right. Yeah. And it's like, you're going to go meet your captain. This is like the day of graduation. In the morning, you go meet the captain of your new work location. And I drive up, and I'm like, oh, interesting. This neighborhood is interesting. The houses are boarded up. I mean, it literally looked like a war zone. It looked like something out of a TV show. So I'm like, okay, I think I know what I'm getting into here. And it's like, all right, you do 12 weeks of field training. And after field training, I was on late shift. It was midnight to 8. And I absolutely loved it. I did not know it, but it was one of the most violent, crime-ridden areas of the city, or maybe the country, if statistically. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever for a brand new cop.
Well, that's interesting about Milwaukee, because when you think about violent crime, places where that happens, like Milwaukee isn't the first place that probably pops into most people's imaginations, right? But it's a decently sized city. I say this as also a Chicagoan who naturally looks down on Milwaukee, and I have a bias. I'll just go to admit, but like any city, it has crime, and obviously this evolves over the decades and the years. But what was sort of the major crimes that Milwaukee faced?
Well, when I started in 95, it was kind of the apex of we call them the crack wars.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton had the crime bill, and I'm not a huge fan of his politics, but God bless him. He's the reason why I became a cop, is because of the money that was infused into the city.
Yeah.
And later on, I got promoted because of the same crime bill. So without that, I wouldn't have had that career. So, and it was to combat the violent crime rates that were like skyrocketing through the country. Milwaukee was a city of a little under 600,000. And when I joined up, we were getting about 250 homicides a year.
Wow.
And a little under 1,000 non-fatal shootings.
Wow. And for a city the size of Milwaukee, that's a large homicide rate.
Oh, it's huge. We were consistently in the top 10 in the country.
Yeah.
As far as homicide goes. So it was, when I was newer, it was almost every night you were responding to some kind of shooting, man with a gun, shots fired, stabbing. That was our bread and butter. That's what we responded to the most. I mean, I'll just tell you a quick story. After I was on for a while, I was just getting so sick of it. I asked my boss, I'm like, because I went like a week and I was in a shooting every day, not me shooting, but responding to a shooting. And you were always surrounded by live gunfire, always. That was just, it became background noise. And I just went to my boss and I'm like, I've had enough. Do you mind if I work inside as Booker? And he said, no problem. So I'm thinking to myself, hopefully it'll be a nice slow night. Everything's going to be hunky-dory. And what happens is, every district station has a gas pump in all the squad cars. And this big old hoopty rolls up to the gas pump. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? And the horn is honking like crazy. And I'm like, so I go out there. I'm like, this is not Sitco. This isn't Amoco. The gas station is a block away, dude. And he looks at me and he says, I've been shot. And I'm like, are you kidding me? They're coming to me now. And I'm like,
you can't escape it.
Exactly. Yeah. He was playing poker. He was cheating. And somebody shot him in the knee with a shotgun. I'm shocked he was able to.
As a poker player, I get it.
Yes. Then he starts fighting with the paramedics. And I'm like, oh, my God, I cannot get away from this stuff. Oh, my Lord.
Wow. Yeah, man. So you started in the middle of the crack wars, and eventually those subsided. And after you sort of had that rude awakening into law enforcement, what happened next?
It was great. I stayed in patrol for the entirety of my career. I did not want to be an inside person, and we need inside people as well. But the fun and just the enjoyment of patrol was second to none. You know, what you see on TV is like detectives running after people and in car chases. No, they're not. A suit and tie detective shows up an hour after everything happens.
Yeah.
They just don't magically fall out of the air like you see on TV or the movies. Patrol are the ones who, they do the fighting, they do the writing, they do the chasing, the car chase. Back when I started, our pursuit policies were a lot more liberal. There weren't cameras in the squad cars, or there were no body cameras back then. We would chase you until the wheels fell off, you ran out of gas, or you crashed.
Sure.
In that order.
My partner, Andrew, who also does these interviews, loves cop shows. And we also often talk about what's the most realistic, what's this, what's that. And I just got done rewatching actually The Shield on FX, which is one of my very extreme show. But just
a bit.
Yeah, a little bit of extreme show. And that show is, if you're not familiar, if you're listening and you're not familiar, it was a show on FX in the late 2000s starring Michael Chiklis, who is not playing the commish. If you watch Michael Chiklis in the commish,
it's
the exact opposite of what the commish is.
Yes, he is definitely not the commish in this.
It's the exact and wonderful. I mean, wonderfully acted and written show, and it's based on the LAPD Rampart Division, which went kind of wild in the late '90s. But I bring this up to say that one part of the show is that the people who are in charge seems to constantly be changing policies. You're putting new policies into place, and you can do this today, you can't do this tomorrow. And I'm sure that's a heightened version of something that actual police have to deal with. Like, how did you guys deal with that constantly shifting priority list?
I was a sergeant, and that was the best job on the department. And the reason being
what does it entail?
Well, you are in charge of, my job was being in charge of the street cops, the cops who actually went out and did police work, who took your 911 calls, who did proactive policing, that were doing the chasing, most officer involved shootings or critical incidents involve the street cop. It's not a detective. It's not whoever, even like the SWAT guys compared to guys that are in SWAT, just regular patrol. It's just by statistics, by numbers. They have more interactions with the public. And these things happen very, very quickly. And as a sergeant, I was in charge of the coppers that were out on the street. So I had to respond to all the homicides. I had to respond to armed robberies, sexual assaults, child abuse, fires, fatal car accidents, anything big. I would have to write a report if a cop kicked down a door, if a cop uses taser, if they use their firearm, whatever. I would have to conduct the investigation. But even more importantly was I was the buffer between the captain and the lieutenant and the street cops.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like you have a captain going off the rails about this, that, or the other thing. And I'm like, yeah, I got it. I'll take care of it. Yeah. But I'm like, I'll take care of it, Captain. Thank you. Thank you for your input.
Yeah, I guess the equivalent in journalism or podcast world or television world is you were the executive producer, right? And you had a whole bunch of producers under you. And your job was to keep the producers producing and keep the show going while you were a buffer between them and like the executives above you. And you had to make sense of the latest edict of the day. Like, no, we want to do this with the show today, right? Or let's do a little more of this or a little less of that.
Right.
That must have been a challenge to communicate out and keep things consistent for folks.
It was. And when I would do a roll call with the cops, you'd hear some belly aching about, hey, the DA, I know they're not going to issue this because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like, not our problem, guys.
Yeah.
Our job is to go arrest bad guys. Our job is to go save lives. These are parts of our job. We don't issue charges on people. The DA does.
Yeah.
So don't get your head, like, hey, on the news last night, the mayor was saying X, Y, and Z. Okay, that's nice. Duly noted.
Sure.
But go out there and do your jobs and do them right. As long as you, I tell you what, as long as you follow the Constitution and for the most part, the rules and procedures of your department, if you know those SOPs frontwards and backwards, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
There are anomalies to that. I will say where a cop has done the right thing, their heart's in the right place. They had half of a second to make a decision, and now they're going to fry for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's an impossible job in some ways, right? Like it
is.
Yeah.
Yes.
People want police officers to always make the right and perfect decision in a constantly shifting environment of different variables, right? I can't think of a more difficult job because humans are so unpredictable, especially when you encounter them, they're probably at their most unpredictable, right?
Oh,
yeah. Did you ever at any point feel that pressure to be perfect? Did you allow yourself to be human?
Well, you know what? We're all human beings.
Yeah.
And again, being a sergeant was the best job ever, I thought, because you get to know your coppers.
Yeah.
The guys and gals that are taking the assignments on the street, and somebody'd come in and they just have that look on their face that they usually don't have, pull them in the office and like, okay, what's going on? And it's like, you know what, Sarge, I had to put my dog down today. This big, tough guy that looks like he could bench press a small truck is starting a ball, and it's like, get out of here. You're off tonight.
Yeah.
But that's the human side. As a sergeant, if I could do something proactive to avoid a catastrophic error, I would do it. And that's why, like a good sergeant is going to be going to some of the more hairier assignments with their cops.
Yeah.
And they're going to help them out. And, two heads are better than one, or four are better than one, or whatever the case may be. So you tried to be that buffer. You tried to be the voice of reason. I was the mediator. Sometimes, not sometimes, you would have citizens that would make complaints about the cops saying, you know what, Officer X or Y said this, that, or the other thing. I think they should be doing this. I want to talk to your boss. Okay. I'll be happy to respond. I'll explain it to you. And we're all human beings. We get caught up in that. No, I'm right. No, you're wrong. Blah, blah, blah. And as the boss, I could just come in and say, it was almost like I was a little mini judge. It's okay. This is what's going to happen. Yeah, but no, yeah, but this is what's going to happen. Sorry. This is the way it is.
That experience as a sergeant and going to those Harrier moments, man, you had 25 years on the streets, and you must have seen some wild stuff every day, but there have to be a few that really stuck out to you, like the stuff that if you go to a police convention and everyone's swapping stories, like everyone has that one story or two stories. Like, what are your sort of, I can't believe I experienced that, or I saw that, or I went through that?
There are so many of them. Starting from my first week on the job, I'm on field training. We get a call for a stabbing. They give a description of a black male, 20 years of age, wearing a white T-shirt and black jeans, armed with a knife. And so, okay, so it's 7 o'clock in the morning. We're about a block away. Well, what do you think is running right at us? It's a dude who just stabbed somebody.
Yeah.
And I jump out of the van. I draw down on him, and I think he could tell that I was probably more scared than he was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like, get on the ground, drop the knife, and he's just covered in blood. And he does. My FTO, the guy training me, hooks him up. We put him in the back of the wagon, and he's like, usually they're running the other way. And I'm like, yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
So to make a long story short, I wind up riding in the ambulance with the victim, and he don't look good. He's circling the drain.
Yeah.
And they say, get a dying declaration from this guy. And I'm like, I think I remember that from the academy. I'm not sure. So I'm like, dude, you are going to die. Who killed you? And the paramedics are looking at me like, hey, you want to
that was your open?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, you want to tone that down a little bit?
Yeah.
And this poor guy is just gurgling. And to make a long story short, after, he's in the trauma room and he crashed 3 times. Doctor grabs a scalpel, opens up his chest, and starts doing open heart massage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm 15 feet away. And my jaw's on the ground. I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
So I went from arresting a homicide suspect to watching this guy die on the table in a very dramatic fashion, and then go back and write hours and hours worth of reports.
In your first week.
Yeah.
And you had to draw your weapon. I mean, I think people overestimate how often a police officer actually draws their weapon, right? I mean,
when I was working in that neighborhood, it was multiple times a night. And that wasn't like at a barking dog or something like that. I remember one of my first assignments on like my second day on the job. Yeah, my second day on the job, we got called to an entry in progress. It's a grocery store in a very, very poor neighborhood that had been abandoned for I don't know how long. And there's no electricity. It's 6 in the afternoon, or in the evening, excuse me, hotter than heck. Oh my God, it was just broiling hot. There's no ventilation. And the owner was waiting for us. It was an entry in progress, and it took us like half hour, 45 minutes to get there. That's how backlogged we were. The owner's this like old Polish guy out in front of his store there. And we're like, stay here. We got to clear it. So flashlight and gun is out, and you're going through it, and you don't know if somebody's going to pop up on you or not. And I heard glass break just crunch behind me, like from a footstep. I spin around with my gun and my flashlight, and it's the dude. And I'm like, I almost shot you.
Wow.
And his eyes were as big as saucers. I said, get the F out of here now. I started screaming at him. I was so angry that I almost shot this guy. But then, I think about later on, and it all starts melding together. That wasn't that other like dying declaration. That wasn't the first one I've ever done. I've done a few. I've just watched people die after they've been shot up or stabbed or whatever. And probably the ones that stick in my head are, I was a month away from getting promoted. I was a police officer. I was working by myself. And I get sent to a shooting at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, all right, I'm working midnight to 8. That's the last thing you want to get sent to, because You just want to go home. You're tired, you're whatever. And I respond, and a sergeant is responding from the other side of the district, and he was a brand new sergeant. He had maybe 2 or 3 weeks on the street as a sergeant. Real good guy. And he's like, yeah, stand by for me. And I'm like, okay. So I look, and the fire department's already working on the guy. He's on the front porch. And I look, it wasn't a shooting. This guy's head looked like a pumpkin. I'll never forget it as long as I live. And I found his ear in the bushes.
Good Lord.
His ear was sheared off. What happened was, and this made national news, and the way the national news portrayed it and the way it actually happened are two different things. Mm-hmm. National news said that he got into an argument with a bunch of kids, and one of them threw an egg at one of the kids, and it was a gang beating. What it was actually, and this is from a witness that was there that I spoke with, what he owed $20 to the dope man, to the local drug dealer. So the dope man gave 3 kids, ages 15, 16, and 17, I think. They were all under 18. Mm-hmm. Like $20. He gave him $20, and he says, go teach them a lesson. Well, before you know it, mob mentality kicks in. They chase this guy down the street, up onto a porch, and they just start beating him with rakes, baseball bats.
Good Lord. Anything
they could find, rocks. I think there was like 6 or 7 kids. The youngest was 9 years old. 9. And this kid this happened at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Nobody in that neighborhood, nobody bothered helping him or calling the police. Nobody.
I don't understand that. I mean, I understand it, but I don't understand it.
But here's the thing. A 9-year-old kid So I'm talking to a witness, and she said, yeah, he was jumping up and down on this poor man's head, and there's blood squirting out of his eyes and his ears. And he was laughing the whole time. Everybody thought it was a huge joke. This guy was pleading for his life. He was begging. He was trying to get in a window. That's why he ran up to this porch. And you could see the scratch marks on the wood. And you could see the wood. He was trying so hard, the wood was embedded under his fingernails. Those are images you'll never forget. And I remember, the sergeant shows up and he looks at me and says, what do you got, O'Donnell? And I'm like, that's a great question. I have no idea what I got. All I know is this guy is almost dead. I'm surprised he's breathing at all. They took him to the hospital and he died later. He was pretty much dead there.
Yeah.
But what a horrible, horrible way to die.
And I'm guessing those kids were arrested. They were probably put into the system. They went to juvie. They went to gladiator school, and they probably came out.
They were all released when they were 17, including the 9-year-old.
Yeah.
And guess what happened with the 9-year-old once he was released from prison? Well, not prison, from jail.
Yeah, I'm guessing he committed yet another horrific crime.
Yeah, he killed somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't know how you fix that.
Well, I mean, our prison systems aren't correctional institutes. They're gladiator schools. They're crime universities in most cases, right? So, I mean, it's not like he was going to get psychiatric help for 8 years.
That was, there was a juvenile jail in the state of Wisconsin, and they got rid of that. Now it's pretty much at home, like monitoring and this, that, and the other thing. That doesn't work. They don't have an answer. I don't, unless you just lock them up forever so they can't victimize somebody else again. But it's pretty bleak.
You're on the street for 25 years, so that means you retired in about 2020?
Yes. The great thing about my job and most public safety jobs is you have a good idea when you can and when you're going to retire.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, it's a young man's game. Yeah. Pushing around a squad car ain't for old guys like me. I was 55 when I retired, and that's old for being a cop on the street for their entire career. So I knew it, and this is before COVID came along or anything like that. I had my mind made up. I'm like, 2020, January 16, pop and smoke. See ya.
You got out January 16th. You got out of policing just in time.
And I'll tell you what, it was horrible because all the George Floyd stuff was kicking off. And
You're sitting back watching all that.
Yes.
Recently retired. I mean, you still have policing in your blood. That was your everyday for 25 years.
I couldn't sleep. I don't know how many days I went without any sleep, watching TV, watching all these riots with my guys working 12, 16-hour days, getting rocks and bottles, getting shot at. One of my
Kenosha.
And my wife, just sat me down and she said, Pat, you've been through more than one riot. You've worked like 72 hours in a row. It's time to let somebody else do it. But I had survivor guilt like you wouldn't believe. My God, it chewed me up.
Because you probably wanted to be there. You wanted to be there.
Absolutely. I wanted to be right in the middle of it.
Yeah. You had to do something else with your life at that point. And is this when you started turning to your sort of new chapter, writing books, hosting podcasts, consulting? How did you find your way in your post-police life?
I'm a big believer in the term dig the well before you're thirsty.
Yeah.
Like I said before, you know what? I knew retirement was on the horizon. Of course, being a cop, I had one divorce under my belt, so it cost me money. So, I got to make money. And you have to do something. You have to have a purpose. And I'm 55 years old. I'm not that old. I'm not ready to be farmed out yet, sitting on the porch drinking mint juleps and smoking cigars, even though that does sound kind of good.
Yeah, I'll take it, yeah.
But I'm like, okay, I got to do something here. So when I was still working about 23 years in, 24 years in, somewhere in that ballpark, I wrote a book about how to buy a car. When I was on the waiting list for Milwaukee, I was on the waiting list for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, I was working in restaurants. I sold cars for 4 years. I bartended. And somebody, I forget how it started. They're like, you should write a book about how to buy a car without getting ripped off. So I'm like, all right, I'll do it. It was a glorified PDF. Then, long story short, I thought I had a publisher that went down the tubes and I was just going to throw it out. And they're like, well, you could do it yourself. You can self-publish. And I'm like, you can? I thought you needed a New York agent and all this other stuff. And it's like, no. I'm like, oh, okay. So I threw it up on Amazon. It actually sold. Yeah. And then I started going to writers' conferences, started listening to self-publishing podcasts, and like best practices for writing, yada, yada. And I was at a conference, and inevitably, everybody knows you're a cop. I'm not wearing a T-shirt. I'm not, my first conference, I knew one person out of 300.
Yeah.
And all the magic happens at the happy hour, at the bar after the conference.
Like that. Yeah.
That's where the real deal starts up.
Absolutely.
And all these people, these writers are coming up to me and says, you're the cop guy, right? And I'm like, again, I'm not wearing a T-shirt or a sandwich board or whatever. And I'm like, they had very good questions. Hey, would you need a warrant for this? Is this realistic? Would a taser do this? Blah, blah, blah. They honestly don't know.
Yeah.
And I was more than happy to help them. They were very kind, very nice. And somebody that knows a lot more about this stuff, I already wrote a few more books that had nothing to do with police work, all under pen names. He said, you should write a book about police procedure specifically for writers. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's a good idea. So I did. I wrote 2 of them. So those sold, and they continue to sell very well.
Cops and Writers is what it's called.
Cops and Writers, yep. And what happened was, I'm like, well, I have to promote these. So I started a Facebook group, Cops and Writers. Mm-hmm. And it was me, my editor, and a couple of friends. Now there's 8,300 people in there worldwide.
Wow.
And it was just featured in the Wall Street Journal. I was on the front page 1 of the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
A couple of weeks ago.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Dude, I never would. Are you kidding me? Yeah. I'm just some flatfoot from Milwaukee, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And I'm in the Wall Street Journal, and they did a real nice story about me. Huh. And I was shocked. I'm like, wow.
So you're sort of becoming the go-to. Well, you're a consultant for police procedure for writers. Is it primarily like fiction writers? Do you ever have screenwriters come to you?
Oh, I have screenwriters. I've got fiction writers. I've also done 2 true crime shows, one in the United States and one over in England, where I was featured. I was like the narrator. And I've never been I've been in front of cameras before, like at crime scenes.
Sure.
But never in that environment. Yeah, I'm just like, wow, this is different.
It's a skill in itself, right?
It sure is. And so then to promote the book also, I started going on podcasts. And I'm like, you know what? This isn't too tough, and I really enjoy it. So I started my own podcast, and now I just checked on Listen Notes. I'm in the top 3% of like all podcasts right now.
Oh, wow. Oh, very
So
nice.
I you knocked me over with a feather. I've got people every day asking to be a guest on my show.
It sounds like you really found your niche. I know a lot of people who retire from public service, be it policing or fire or the military. Sometimes it takes a while to find your thing, and sometimes people never do. And for people who are in that position, what's your best advice?
Find something that you're passionate about. And here's my advice. And this is 5 years retired now, and watching people retire through the years. If you retire as a cop on Friday, don't take a job as another cop in another department on Monday. Cut yourself some slack. Take the summer off. Take a month off. Do something. Reconnect with your family that you haven't seen forever. Say hi to your kids. Do something really nice for your spouse. Just be nice. And then after that, like I said, find your passion. It's like I bartend once or twice a week at my buddy's place, and I absolutely love it. I think it's fun. It pays for my motorcycle and my car, and I have a blast, but it also gives me that human connection. People are going into bars. A lot of times they're not coming into a bar to drink. They're going there to vent about their wife or their kids or this, that, or the other thing. And that's what I'm used to.
Yeah. It feels right? And it keeps you connected, to that thing that has sort of been a through line of your life, right?
Absolutely. And more advice is, you know what? It's real easy to feel sorry for yourself, throw yourself a pity party. Yeah. And all the answers are not at the bottom of that bottle of whiskey. I promise you that. Nothing wrong with it being sociable, have a drink every now and then. But when you have all this extra time now, if you do, boy, that could be dangerous. So you work on yourself. I'm in the gym every day. I absolutely love it. And just take care of yourself. We're not getting younger when you retire. It's like, take care of yourself, find your passion. And it doesn't have to be something big and lofty. And cut yourself some slack if what you thought you're going to do doesn't work out.
Yeah. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace.
Exactly. It's like, okay, I'm going to leave law enforcement, then I'm going to be a physical therapist. You go back to school and it's like, oh, shoot, I haven't been to school for 30 years. Okay, things have changed a little bit. Maybe my goal was a little too lofty. Maybe I could do this instead. And most of us have that luxury of you can try different stuff.
Yep. And there's no reason not to. I mean, life is made up of a series of moments. None of us know how many are left to us at any given point.
That's for sure.
So I think it's, really important to spend all of those moments wisely, because time is really the only currency that we have to spend, right? And people who have experienced depression or pity parties or trying to figure out what to do with their lives, it's really easy to fall into that trap. I have. Yep. And when you're out the other side of it, you look back and you're like, man, I wasted a lot of time feeling bad for myself where I could have been, don't be hard on yourself for it, but where you really could have been like trying to look forward instead of backwards, right?
Oh, absolutely. Attitude is everything. I'm a firm believer in that. Life can be filled with self-fulfilling prophecies that are doom and gloom. At the top of the interview, you were talking about, how politicians and police chiefs, et cetera, overreact to everything. It's Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Don't be that way. Yeah. It's not falling. We'll get through it. It just seems like in today's world for the last 5, maybe more years, everything is so extreme. It's like, oh, this is the worst time ever to be alive. No, this is the best time in history to be alive. Yeah. And we're doing what we're doing right now. 10 years ago, I would have told you, you're nuts. There's no way I'm going to be on a podcast. What's that? Yeah. On-demand radio.
If you're Marty McFly in 1985, hopping in your DeLorean, and you come to 2025, you see us chatting, you're in Wisconsin, I'm in Florida right now, and you're recording what? How? It would look like magic, right?
Well, I've sold thousands and thousands of books, and it's mostly been by myself. This never would have happened.
Yeah.
Like even 10 years ago, this would not have happened. Guarantee it.
I'm fascinated by successful self-publishers. Like, give me your top 3 of best practices. Like, if you really want to be a successful self-publisher, what should you be doing?
I think it's across the board because, I also, the Brew City Blues books, I had a publisher. And I wrote 4 books with.
So you've lived on both sides of the.
I've lived on both, and I like indie publishing the best. And the best practices for this is first off, it's got to be a good story.
Yeah.
No matter if you're self-published or just
story
whatever.
matters. Yeah.
Yes, it's got to be a good story, and you have to have compelling characters. And you got to put them in some dire straits. Nobody's going to want to read a story about, I woke up, I made some eggs. I'm running late for this interview. I'm going to go get my car service. No, put their life in danger, for God's sakes. The stakes have to be high. You want to read the story or watch the show where it's seconds away, like almost every James Bond film. You're seconds away from the world being annihilated. You have to know the nuclear codes or whatever. Yeah. You got to stop Dr. No.
The timer's almost at 0, yeah.
Exactly. Make those stakes huge. Yeah. That's big. Story, characters, consistency. I had, his name is Tom Turner. He writes the Palm Beach detective books. He's got like 30-some books. He's a self-published author. He's very, very popular. And he is so consistent. He writes like 3 or 4 books a year.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to do. I mean, nothing's going to happen. You can't edit a blank page. You just got to do the work. You give yourself a goal, and it's, 500 or 1,000 words a day. If you can.
Writers write, right?
Yes.
That's the job. Yeah.
Exactly.
Treat it like a job. Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of writers are surfing the net. They're looking out the window. They're doing whatever. It's like there's a lot of flashy new stuff out there, like software programs and marketing tactics and whatever else, which I'm not poo-pooing by any stretch.
But at the end of the day, you have to have a product, right?
Exactly. And that's where that gets missed. Nothing sells your new book like the next book you're going to write.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So those are my consistency, great character, great story. And you have to have some tenacity and a thick skin because there are lots of trolls out there, and there's people that are going to be in your ear, and they're going to, and you know what? And some of them are going to be other authors, unfortunately. But for the most part, the writing community that I've dealt with have been nothing but kind and just very supportive. We're all in this together. There's millions and millions of readers. There's enough for all of us.
Patrick O'Donnell, before I end this, I'd like to ask a question. Same question I ask everyone at the end of an interview. What should I have asked that I didn't?
Oh, boy. What should you... Well, I'm sure you'll do the where can people find you at the end.
Yes, that doesn't count. That doesn't count.
Oh, okay, that doesn't count. Did you ask about my latest book? Here comes the self-promotion.
Patrick O'Donnell, why don't you tell us about your latest book?
Okay, the latest book is The Good Collar. It's the first book in the Michael Quinn Vigilante series. Mm-hmm. If you're a fan of Dexter, John Wick, Death Wish, you're going to absolutely love this book. Just imagine, Dexter was one of my favorite police shows. I don't have
Great
many.
Show. Yeah.
But absolutely loved the writing was spot on. The actors were, you couldn't ask for better actors for those roles, I thought. They knocked it out of the park. Mm-hmm. And the writing was so crisp and just spot on. And I just love the premise of, here's this serial killer under everybody's nose, under a bunch of homicide detectives' noses. These guys are trained professionals, and they just can't figure it out until the end. And I thought to myself, well, what if Dexter was a police chaplain?
Ooh.
So the book starts out with the main character is a 30-something-year-old gang sergeant in Milwaukee. It's all set in Milwaukee. And life is great. He's been married for a while to the love of his life. And they've been trying to have kids, and she finally gets pregnant, and she surprises him at dinner. She takes him out to eat. Everything's going great. And, of course, as they're walking out of the restaurant, they get jumped. She's brutally attacked and killed. He's left in a coma. And, of course, he survives. And, he's in a horrible depressive state afterwards. And the police chaplain that's like in his 60s or so is trying to help him.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't realize that this police chaplain is a serial killer. He rights all the wrongs. All the people that have slipped through the cracks of the criminal justice system, he takes care of. So what happens is he's this police sergeant that's kind of going down the drain. He gets drunk. He's turning into an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And he gets into an off-duty thing at a bar. He's about to get fired. And the police chaplain saves his job and his pension by making him the next police chaplain. The old police chaplain has cancer, and he's on his way out.
Yeah.
So he's going to be his successor. And of course, he kills like 3 or 4 people in this fight, when they get jumped. And there's 2 that get away. And of course, they get off on technicality. So the police chaplain that's the serial killer is like, okay, you're going to carry this mantle. You're going to do my work. So he agrees to this. But of course, the subplot is he's going after the guys that killed his wife.
So he agrees to be a serial killer.
Yes.
That is a fascinating take on that, because I like that, because a conscious choice to do that. That's a really inventive way to get into that.
And at first, it's a way to get to these guys that killed his wife, to get revenge.
Sure.
And it starts turning into something else. And he was raised a good Irish Catholic boy, like me. And he went to seminary when he was in high school, and his father died when he was in high school. They owned a family butcher shop. He had to go. And it wasn't really for him anyways. He likes girls, so that wasn't going to fly. So he's got this little Irish mother that's spunky as hell, and his sister is a nun, so his sister is a sister.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's going to be close calls, and of course, his sister that's a sister is hot. So his cop friends are always going to be making snide remarks. I've got a good cast of characters.
And is it out now?
Yes, it is out now.
Where can people find that and your other work?
Amazon. I'm Amazon exclusive for The Good Collar.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my other books are on Amazon as well. I'm exclusive there. And my website is copsandwriters.com. You can find me on there. My YouTube channel, my podcast, Cops and Writers. That's on all popular podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify, etc.
And we will put links to that in the description of this show. So make sure to check out all of Patrick's work. Patrick O'Donnell, thank you so much for joining us. I love the fascinating conversation. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, it went fast, didn't it?
It did. It was very fast.
All right. Thank you so much.